Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for showing to our talk. We are really excited to be here and talk about our journey to confident automated changes, and we will get at some point into what that really means. First of all, I'm happy to be here. I'm Roberto Perez, Senior Software Engineer at Netflix, and my stunning colleague, Aubrey Chipman. We both work in the JVM ecosystem team. We provide all the build, package, publish, testing, and JDK lifecycle experience for Netflix engineers. So we don't have a formal agenda, but we would like to talk a little bit about the engineering ecosystem. Most likely folks are familiar with this. We ran a DVD company for 25 years. We shut it down last year, if I recall, or this year. So we have evolved. And today we are a streaming company that not only do TV shows and movies, we also do live events. NFL is coming to you on Christmas. We have Netflix games as well in your mobile devices. So as you can imagine, we keep adding these verticals when it comes to business products. So we're going to focus on the JVM backend landscape because we have many technologies, we have many things that we do at Netflix. So it wouldn't be possible to just talk about Netflix architecture and how we have evolved overall. So we're just going to narrow it down to this thing today. So for us, there are four major things that have happened in the architecture at Netflix, evolution-wise. So first one was going from on-premise data center to the cloud. So we were kind of popular to take a step and start moving everything to AWS. And in order to do that, we also moved from monolithic to microservices, right? Everybody loves microservices. It's amazing. And at the same time, because we were trying to be pioneers in the industry, we created Netflix open source components. If you are a Java developer, you probably remember things like Eureka, Hystrix, anything that you might need in order to do service discovery, fault tolerance, etc. in the JVM. And many things like the famous Chaos Monkey, so we can do fault injection, shut down VMs on demand, and see how resilient we will be for our customers. But at some point, we found out that the community was going somewhere else. Like, obviously, they are not going to adopt our internal framework called Governator. Spring became very popular, in particular Spring Boot. We could benefit from this community and also contribute back to that. So we decided to move to Spring Boot. And funny story, the Spring Boot Netflix was born before Netflix actually used a Spring Boot. So fascinating. So how we got here? We got here by doing something we call full cycle developers. For you folks that are in this audience, you're probably very familiar with platform teams. We created platform teams where we will have subject matter experts on many things. Build tools, deployment pipelines, metrics and alerts, etc. So we will provide building blocks for every single engineer. So an engineer that might be working on some streaming application doesn't have to learn all these tools. They just need to use the building blocks and be sure to develop that product and operate it without much friction. And we call that the pay path. Many companies call it pay path, pay roads, golden path. It's just a way to say these are the practices and these are the tools that we recommend folks to get their job done on a daily basis. And this is something that changes over time and you need to revisit every now and then. So today, after all these years, when it comes to Java or JVM backend applications, we have a multi-repo setup. We have more than 4,000 Git repositories. We deploy more than 2,800 applications. Most of these applications have a client, so we do binary integration. As you can see, logos here, very popular open source projects and also internal teams that we have open source as well. We use Java, Kotlin, Scala, and many other languages. So we try to serve the JVM community overall within Netflix. So we actually build an eventually consistent distributed monolith. This is a dependency graph from a service probably 8 years ago. So it was hard to really understand what was going on. So being multi-repo has some advantages, but one of the disadvantages is how do you keep all these things up to date? And in addition, as we move into more open source things and how JVM ecosystem has evolved, well, we found ourselves in the situation where there are more versions, the release cadence have changed. Java gets released every 6 months. You can see that in 2022, 2023, Maven Central had more new libraries and new versions of these libraries. So how do you keep all these 4,000 repositories fresh with dependencies that has the best recommendations for engineers? So that's when we realized over these years that we had to invest in delivering changes at a scale. We did many things. We tried from we can clone the repositories, we can upgrade your libraries, run some compilation, deliver the change. We created our own scheduling tooling to open pull requests on GitHub, on Bitbucket, email notifications using third-party libraries like Open Rewrite that was born on Netflix, and they have a company called Modern. So everything is perfect, right? Like, why are we here? Like, we already solved the problem. We can deliver change, right? But turns out delivering change is hard.
All right. So now we're going to talk about how we go about making code changes at scale. And specifically, what are the hardships or difficulties that we have with this? Are there any difficulties at all? Let's find out. So here's something from a recent Netflix job posting where we talk about changing code is hard. And this has to do with what Roberto was talking about with binary integration, where we're going to be changing many projects, thousands of Git repositories, thousands of applications, of libraries. And we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that people can feel safe and successful in these automated changes. And is this something that's going to go perfectly well? Is it something that's even difficult? We're not sure. Let's see. Someone's particular opinion to our job posting over here was of the opinion that it can't be a hard problem. They said, what the heck are you doing that requires changing code in so many repositories? Well, in fact, we're doing the binary integration rather than a monorepo kind of structure. And they had also brought up that maybe the difficult part would be getting permission to apply the patches. But we already have that particular system, so what else might be involved? We see that technology, in fact, is not the only aspect for a successful code change. Like Roberto was talking about, we have a lot of the tooling and infrastructure to make the code insertion and merging already successful. Let's take a look at a real-world example. So this is one where we are updating application JDKs at scale. So this is going to be updating the application runtime JDK. For us, it's going to be a really small code change. This is someone's build file. We want to inject these 5 lines of code inside of there that says, this is your Java language version. Please use 17 for your application. We want to make sure this is going to be as minimal of a change as possible for our users, so it's understandable, but doesn't add a lot of cruft or just bloat into their project. So what we do is we use this as a signal and make sure that we're adding in the correct Java packages into their deployed application, either a Debian or Docker image. For this, we also have an internal campaign tool so that we can plan and follow up in these migrations. That way we know the adoption, are people merging in these pull requests, these kind of items. Let's take a look at our campaign plan. So here's the first part where we just have information overall. It's going to tell you what's going to happen, why this pull request was sent to you, what kinds of things you can expect. And let's go through each of these individual steps as well. So the first part, each of these applications is going to go get a code change as an SCM pull request. This is going to get generated by us and sent over to their application project. At this point, because it's a pull request, we have the contract that we expect validation steps to occur before something can get merged into the repository. This is going to be something like running someone's build, running all their tests, whatever it looks like for a successful pull request to get merged in automatically. Once this is merged in, we go ahead, create an artifact. This gets deployed to lower environments. And then by the time we get over here, we're going to be deploying real production traffic to this particular instance. It's what we call canarying. You might be familiar with it by another term over at your company, but we are going to be taking live traffic with this application itself. And assuming that goes well, there's automated performance metrics that get gathered. Then we want to have this go live with JDK update, fully deploy the application. So this was very easy, right? Right?
Yeah, so it is not. So let's look at the learnings. So the first thing is you might get an incident because even though you upgraded an application and you have test coverage as you thought it was enough, well, you also produce libraries and those libraries get leaked into platforms that are not ready. So now you have a problem pushing an SMS notification before a show goes live. So the whole company is in trouble at that moment. Now, a campaign like Java 17, you can imagine is a good size campaign. And you cannot just go and watch every single human doing their job. It just doesn't scale. That's why we build tooling. But turns out, like, even though we got a lot of adoption right away, like organic adoption, some people were not completing their work. We were on 86% because we are targeting thousands of applications that need to be upgraded. Like, how do you move the needle for these folks? And then you realize, like, well, all the due dates are past, right? So even though we have the right tooling, we have delivered change, it is not enough for people because maybe they don't feel confident. So this is just Java 17. What if you have multiple campaigns? As platform teams, we tend to fall into the trap of doing many things in parallel. So you start sending changes to engineers and teams until the point that they have this kind of experience where there are many pull requests that they need to review and merge and validate. And well, obviously this is overwhelming for them. And then you realize that they are not even deploying this. Like they merged it, but it's not approved into production. So really the change didn't make it through. Like it's irrelevant that you merge something into the main line if you are not deploying it anyway. So we ask ourselves, like, is this really enough? And people can say, well, that's decent. Like you can get some changes out there. You will need a lot of human interaction. Doing a campaign might take months. But for us, it's really not enough because although we provided changes at a scale, our users were not taking advantages of them. And we were dragging the productivity instead of boosting that. We were asking them to go and look into every single change every time. And also what we think is that we became really good at creating and scheduling changes, not so much about delivering the change at the end. So we were still missing something.
So let's talk about what was missing. If we're able to make the code changes, we have the tooling and the infrastructure, there's still a missing piece someplace. People are not deploying these changes actually into production or not merging them in there if they require some sort of extra validation step. So overall, how can we get to zero-touch deploys for these kinds of campaigns? Assuming that all the validation steps have gone green, we want to make sure that those changes are getting into production as soon as they can. That way people don't need to take a look at it. It's going well. So this might be something that's very familiar to folks who are over here. Various people have mentioned different surveys, and this is what we did as well. We sent a survey to all of the different application owners. This is thousands of application owners. And we said, how do you feel about some particular items? Let's see what we asked. We asked about confidence questions. Specifically, how do you feel on a scale of strongly agree to strongly disagree that I feel confident about automated commit to deployment workflows with these following types of changes? And we wanted to know about 3 specific parts in particular. 1, application code changes made by my own team. This would be the project I normally work on or my teammate normally works on, that kind of item. Application code changes made from engineers outside of your team, maybe a pull request from a partner team, that kind of item. Or changes that sit outside of the core application code. This might be dependency updates, platform sidecar updates, infrastructure updates. And we thought that seeing people's responses to these questions is going to give us a really valuable amount of data so we can understand what people are thinking about and how confident are they feeling. Maybe this has something to do with why they're not releasing these changes into production. So we saw some very interesting things. We saw that 25% of the people who were queried and went ahead and answered these questions strongly agree with the statement. For this one, it is for getting changes outside of your application code. This is what we decided to concentrate on. This is going to be things like dependency updates, platform updates, sidecar updates, those kinds of things. So items that people haven't specifically worked on as a code change themselves in an application project that they are very familiar with. And we saw that 25% of the people strongly agree that they are happy going from commit to, as long as it goes through the validations, it can go straight to prod. It has really nice validations in there all the way. About 40% of people agree with this statement. And then we saw that there's about a third of the population that are really going to be targets for improvement. So this is where we want to take a look at. We also wanted to take a look at different kind of information about their deployment frequency overall. So we want to make sure that people are consistently deploying, and we wanted to know how often this is occurring. We saw that for these applications who are answering these questions on this survey, about 2% of them are deploying multiple times per day. About 18% of them are deploying daily. Sounds good. I like it so far. About 22% of these applications are deploying on a weekly cadence, and then everybody else is either monthly, which is not as frequent as we would like, or what we're calling ad hoc. So maybe they're deploying when they need a particular change out in production, those kinds of items. So we've got a combination of sentiment survey from this confidence rating per application, as well as deployment frequency, which is information that we're gathering from the deployment systems themselves. So with this data in mind, what is preventing people from achieving these outcomes of commit all the way to deploy to production? We thought maybe our paved path actually has some gravel sections. It might not be quite as streamlined as we're hoping. So what we did is we took and created a virtual team. This is of 23 passionate individuals from platform engineering, product management, subject matter experts, people who are going to take this kind of information and try to figure out, how do we make this better? What are the things that we can do? And we, first of all, just needed to narrow the scope. So first of all, we wanted to have the targets for improvement in these two categories. So people who didn't feel very confident, they weren't in the strongly agree or agree category, and people who are not deploying at least weekly. So just on a monthly or ad hoc basis. As well, we wanted to target this for JDK services. That way we can start over there. This virtual team had various focus areas. So some of them are around things like cleaning up stale applications, because it doesn't do you any good if you're not using it, no one else is looking at it. It's just getting older and getting cruftier. We want to make sure that we have a nice streamlined process for things like dependency updates, for getting things out there frequency, for having great observability, great metrics. And what from all of these different areas, what are some new requirements that we could have for applications so that as long as they are doing these various processes, they're going to feel better. It's going to be a nice guideline that these are definitely things you should have in your application. We took all these focus areas and made a list of engineering requirements. And I do also want to call out that this campaign for the virtual team, how long did it really take us? Well, some folks worked on it for about a quarter. Some folks are still working on it 3 quarters in. So it's definitely a work in progress still and something that is ongoing. So from this, we took these requirements and then we validated them. So this particular process, how would we go about validating these requirements? We brought back out the surveys. So we had validation guided interviews, and we took the same folks who we had asked previously, and we said, imagine that these engineering requirements are actually in place on your applications. How do you feel about your application getting some changes and then deploying them straight through the lower environments, having your standard validations in there, all the way through to production? Does your feeling of confidence change at all? And we really wanted to know and find out if we were on the right track before we start developing any of these particular requirements. Well, we found out that, in fact, people thought we were on the right track. We saw that there was a 23% change potential for these 3 different categories of questions. And specifically, the one we were tracking the most, we saw a 46% uptick of change potential for when you're getting changes external to your application code. From this, we were able to see that we are definitely at least on the right track. Let's go ahead with these engineering requirements, dive in, and see what comes next.
Yeah. So we have mentioned, Aubrey has mentioned engineering requirements, right? And I don't know if you're excited about the engineering requirements or if you want to know about them, but it's just a common thing in the software development lifecycle. Like, how can we make sure that we have better ownership of our application metadata? How can we continue evolving our inner developed testing infrastructure? Like, we found that people didn't have proper test insights, like test coverage, for example. And even though they could get it at the IDE level and such, they really lack a way to see this overall across the company. Delivery infrastructure really has been a great investment from us from the beginning. If you're not familiar, we have the Spinnaker, and we continue evolving that platform, but there's still room for improvement always. Security, source code quality, we grew up in this culture of freedom and responsibility, which meant we are not going to enforce any kind of static code analysis for you, but turns out people care about it. They just don't have the tooling. So this was a major oversight from platform teams to not provide those building blocks that will give people this kind of insight. And we continue investing in more resiliency and scalability testing, observability, and many more. And one thing that we validated is, as Java ecosystem team, all our investments in test infra have been leading the way for other platforms within Netflix. So when we started doing things like detecting flaky tests or doing predictive test selection, test distribution, as we have discussed in previous years, we found that teams also might want some of these features, but now we are in the process of, okay, how can we go in a platform agnostic way so we can deliver this kind of experience for every single engineer in the company. So if you missed that, this is the shameless plug. You can watch the video from our previous year on the investments around testing infrastructure, specifically for the inner development loop. But for us, in this case, we had a few major areas of investments. And everything is really about developer experience when it comes to testing, but also looking into how to do language agnostic tooling and language maturity models, what it means to introduce a new language to Netflix, what are the contracts that we need to put in place. We also found that people sometimes lack things like alerting, observability. Even though they have the tooling, they found really difficult to configure these things. So we created a program called Production Always Ready, which basically provides all that tactical insight and tactical guidance for teams to understand their services better and raise the bar when it comes with operational aspects. One other important thing at Netflix happening is tech debt. Tech debt, we all suffer from that. Everybody has a different perception or definition of tech debt. But for us, we are trying to celebrate when people tackle tech debt. And we are calling this tech debt as innovation. We can go on and on this topic in particular. But in a few words, basically, we try to elevate the work that folks are doing in different teams across the company, from sunsetting things that we don't need anymore to actually renovate a whole platform. So this has been very important for us because in the past, we didn't allocate time for this. So we have to make clear that there is a leadership buy-in here where this is important and we are going to allocate time or engineering resources to tackle this tech debt or to tackle these particular investments. So it's not expected that this will appear out of nowhere in roadmaps, etc. To be honest, most of the work so far is around providing better insights, providing more education to people. So we found that people really appreciated getting proper testing, proper auto-deployment configuration and monitoring workshops. Just by sitting with them, with a subject matter expert and going to the complexity of these things and getting feedback real time to make the tooling better has moved the needle for many engineers. Similar to documentation, we didn't have testing documentation. It sounds absurd, but the reality is that we didn't have a pay path for many testing frameworks in the Java space. Simple things like what framework should I be using? And answering those questions and providing people with repositories with examples, etc., has elevated the engagement from engineers when it comes to these topics. And as I mentioned before, providing test insights is key. And even though we can get all these things for free, we also build things to roll up these insights. So as an engineer, I own 10 plus applications. I can understand where I am when it comes to code coverage, execution time, etc. So we now provide engineers with this level of visibility for them. And something that is fascinating, like this might look simple, but this is probably one of the most impactful things that I have seen at Netflix in the last few months, when is how to notify people about the deployment frequency in a very nice way every week or every X day, so they understand where is everything at any given time. So we give them friendly nudges when they are not deploying constantly. And when they are good, well, we make sure that they know that they are doing the right thing for Netflix when it comes to keeping up to date all the things. And it might sound like a simple Slack and message notification, but this has given folks that level of visibility, that level of grouping that they didn't have before. And just by providing that, they feel also more engaged to go and tackle these problems.
So let's talk about adopting these new practices and tools. So first of all, our strategy overall. We want to make sure that it's easy for people to use these items. We want to have instrumentation for free. You don't need to add something in there, but it's just automatically going to get baked into whatever tooling that you're already using. Similarly, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to ask people to add another specific tool into their day-to-day workflow, but ones that they are used to using, there's going to be new information, new visibility, new tracking in these kinds of areas. We also want to make sure that we're doing more for our customers, just having more of a managed workflow. We do this a lot in the JavaScript space with a managed delivery approach, managed software approach, and also we're doing this more in the JVM space, especially along with the new items in observability, in metrics, in testing insights, these kinds of areas. We also want to have a big impact on cultural change, learning, and education. Specifically, we want to make sure that people bring this with them. So it's not just a one-time campaign where you do this once, spend a lot of energy, make everything really great, and then don't touch it again for a long time. Instead, we want to make sure that this is part of the regular system, that we want to be taking a look at these different kinds of metrics, want to make sure that we're up to date on our various documentations, want to make sure that everything is going to be going smoothly from here on out. In the same vein, we don't want to pursue any major architectural changes. So there's a lot of really great tools and systems that we could use to help solve a variety of our issues. but one of our key components for our strategy is using our existing tooling and bringing in insights from other areas into those places. So some of the things that you saw on the JDK 17 campaign, for example, was a campaign UI that folks have been working on. Internally, we can go see them at your campaigns area. And we want to make sure that we're just adding in more information to places like that, where people already know they can find information as a particular kind of portal. So let's take a look at what this is for the increased confidence and frequency of deployments campaign, the ICFD. So this is the campaign overview. And here is just a really high-level screenshot, but you can see information on the left-hand side that's going to be talking about why you've been sent to this page, why you need to learn about the increasing confidence and frequency of deployments, and what this is going to mean for you. Similarly, there's going to be sections over here with a status summary, which says how many folks who have been who are participating in this campaign have completed it, are in progress, blocked, those kinds of items. And overall progress in general, you'll be able to see what are your campaign targets. So things that your team owns, your manager owns, that kind of idea. Or you can see what your sibling team owns or what a higher level manager roll-up owns that's going to be affected. So for one particular application, let's dive into what we're able to show to our users. So we're guiding our engineers through potential improvements across a variety of areas. So this is going to be things like testing, validation, delivery, operations. And finally, we're going to come back over to confidence and a completion criteria. So in each of these sections, this is just a screenshot of the left-hand panel, kind of a navigation section. And in each one of these, we're going to be talking about more information about documentation, best practices, some examples, how you know if, your application is good to go in this particular area, or maybe it needs some more work over here. And this is something that's also quite subjective. We didn't want to have to say every single project needs to do this the exact same way, but instead, here's the guidance that we're providing. See if it's applicable to you right over here. And the final step over there is taking a look at your updated confidence scores. So after you've been able to go through these different engineering requirements, see which ones are applicable, put them into action, you're able to update how confident are you once more in deploying changes from your team, from a partner team, from a infrastructure sidecar dependency update kind of change, all the way from commit to deploy. And it's really lovely that this happens over at the end, where this is not something that you might go through all at once, but you'll go through section by section and see what is most applicable for you, what's most applicable for this particular application. And so finally, you come back to this confidence area, follow up over here, and hopefully the numbers are looking better. But if they're not, we definitely want to hear about it and find what are some gaps that are missing. It might be affecting this one application, but it might be affecting a lot of different ones, and we'll want to address that. Another area inside of here is you might be able to see sections like focusing on tech debt. And as Roberto was mentioning, we want to talk about tech debt as places where you can innovate. This is something where you might have tech debt and a neighboring project might have a similar kind of tech debt. Here's some examples of what it might look like. Here's some examples of how you could address it. So each of these sections are going to be talking about something kind of like this, where you can go through and see what is applicable for your project. So let's take a look at our progress so far. First of all, we wanted to hear from users. How are you feeling? And overall, engineers are very excited about this. So some of the things they're most excited is one item that Roberto was mentioning about the Slack notifications that get sent to a team channel that shows you how often are your applications actually deploying. Is it happening within every 7 days? Is it longer than that? Is it on a monthly cadence? What do things really look like over there? People really like it and have given us feedback that they really like when they're actionable items, when there's insights in ways that they haven't been able to see it before. For a lot of the insight systems, we've had kind of tracing or instrumentation already existing, but it wasn't visible in the way that it now is. So people are quite excited about this. We like hearing all sorts of feedback, like feature requests, things they wish could be different, but it also warms our hearts when we get the messages that some of the things are working out quite well and they're excited about it. Let's also take a look at our campaign targets by status as well. So we can see over here that by and large, we started this ICFD campaign this year, and most of the folks are over in this completed section. We have the next big category as not started, and then the third big category over here is in progress. So we're very excited to see that those bottom two sections are burning down and see what the outcome is when people get to complete. So we're going to be going over the different results in other categories as well, but just keep in mind that it's still in progress for this campaign. We can take a look at the deployment frequency configuration. So this is information that we're not gathering by asking people, not a subjective kind of item, but it is very qualitative and objective measurements. And so we're able to see from people's deployments, are they deploying daily, weekly, monthly, this kind of item? And the primary big change that we've been able to see is the ad hoc deployments, which used to be something like a quarter or a third of this chart, has really gone down. So those particular areas are deploying more often, hopefully in the daily, weekly category, and we can definitely dive into that with our data. But in this area, we just wanted to see a roll up. What does it look like overall? We can also take a look at our overall confidence score. So initially, we had a lot of people in the agree and strongly agree category. Currently, a few months into this campaign, we have more people who are agreeing that, yes, I do feel confident in deploying my changes from commits all the way through their standard workflow into production. And more people are also strongly agreeing with this statement. There are definitely some folks who are still in the somewhat agree or disagree. So we'll want to have some follow-up conversations over there and figure out if the engineering requirements and tools that we provided aren't working, how else can we help with these particular systems? So these were the items we were measuring from the beginning. Now let's take a look at some other things that came up as well. We see that this is paying off. So for example, we can take a look at these two different colors in this bar chart. And this is about adoption of platform provided libraries. We can see that in the dark coloration, this is a platform library that was released earlier this year, something like January, February, before we had really started running this campaign. And what these sections or groupings are doing is it's saying, how long does it take for this particular library to get adopted inside of the running applications? That first section over there is really where we want to see all the data. That's within 3 days. The next section is 3 to 7 days, 1 to 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, 1 to 3 months, and then beyond 3 months, which is not really where we want that to happen. So we were able to see that platform provided libraries that were provided before we were running this campaign definitely had more of a lag in adoption as opposed to one that was released just a much more recently, probably just a few weeks ago, had close to 100% adoption within 3 days. So that's a different way of taking a look at similar kinds of data, of making sure that people keep their CI/CD wheels warmed, that they're deploying frequently, they're bringing in those dependency updates, getting the new things to adopt. Another thing that we want to talk about is what we call the Confidence Chimp campaign. So as mentioned before, there's Chaos Monkey and Chaos Kong, which are resiliency exercises and resiliency tools. So in the same naming scheme, we have a Confidence Chimp campaign. So this is going to be rolled out for people who are already feeling automated, are feeling confident, and are fully automated. So what is this overall? People receive a email notification and other kinds of notifications like via Slack, via newsletters, letting them know that this is going to be occurring, letting them know which targets are in scope. And we want to be able to kind of throw a switch to build and deploy the latest commits. And this is a platform-led exercise that we're running periodically. So we've run it a few times already. And we want to identify any kind of gaps or friction inside of the SDLC workflow. So overall, we want to be able to run this so that we can find out what kind of issues may be there if we do need to have some sort of automatic remediation that happens at the drop of a hat of an incident, or if we want to be better at automating code changes for migrations and or upgrades. For engineers specifically, we're hoping that they are able to see that, yes, things will go smoothly, or that there is a friction in the CI/CD flow and address it now while the importance is quite low. We're just running a practice exercise rather than when there's an actual incident in place. So as we have run these, so far we've had 200 targeted applications who have gone through this exercise. This just started up a few months ago. So we have some that are currently in progress, some that are blocked, and we expect this to be a regular occurrence continuing onwards. This is not our Confidence Chimp logo, but it is for Chaos Monkey. I really wanted a little Netflix simian over there. So this brings us to our recap.
Yeah. Well, as you can imagine, we are not doing a lot of tooling talk here. It's about how to solve people problem. So we found that we have many tools available for engineers, but they were not getting used. So we had a culture problem, and we tried to focus into that. on how to provide people with insights and continue evolving and augmenting existing tools without changing the way they do things on a daily basis. So a few takeaways. Code changes are part of the life, really. We want to deliver change constantly. We want to keep things up to date. And if you don't do it, like at some point, it's going to create friction. It's going to cost money to a company. And implementing code changes goes beyond transformations and scheduling. Like if you are exploring this, I think our take will be, well, there are companies out there that you can leverage to do that very well. You should focus on the culture aspect, how to make sure that you can land the changes with confidence, because there is no point of pursuing any kind of tooling that will open pull requests with code changes if your verification gate doesn't have quality. So once you have that solid foundation, you can get to the next step, which is zero-touch deployments. And to be honest, I think we did it wrong at the beginning. That's why we're revisiting the approach and tackling the culture problem first. And then when these things are in a better state, then we can talk about again on, okay, how can we migrate you from library A to B, rewrite your code in a way that we platform feel confident as well that we are not going to break production for you. And this is a cultural thing. It takes a lot of people. 23 people are just a small group, really, that went ahead, created requirements, discussed with their teams, but it's really about the company making this a priority, making sure that this is the kind of engineering we want to pursue in the future. So very cross-functional, and again, has to be a company priority in order to be successful. And with that said, thank you so much for spending some extra time with us. If you have any questions, happy to answer them. We will be always happy to chat with you folks, either right now, the hallways, or sing with you later, as you prefer. Thanks.